All right. Good afternoon and good morning, everyone. And thank you so much for joining us on today's webcast, depending on where in the world you're dialing in from today. I'm Mark Moscato. I'm the Chief Marketing Officer here at PeopleFluent, and we are really excited to be bringing you this timely webinar on modern learning. Now, we do have a lot of ground to cover, and our friends from Aragon Research have some fantastic content laid out for us today. But before I hand the line over to Mr. Lundy, I just want to take care of a few quick housekeeping items and provide a quick overview of our company, PeopleFluent, who is actually sponsoring today's call. So all of your phones have been placed on mute, but we do love questions. So we encourage you to type them in via the chat window that should be in the lower right-hand corner of your screen, or the Q&A window. And we'll read through any questions that we receive in this window at the end of the formal presentation. And if we're not able to get to your specific question on the air, we will absolutely reach out to you directly with the response at the conclusion of today's event. All registrants will also receive a link to a recording for this presentation, so you'll have an opportunity to check it out again or forward it along, or basically anyone you think that would want to get this great information. That'll be a resource that you can use. And of course, for any additional information, for some great blog content, please make sure you visit us online over at peoplefluent.com. All right, now that we've got that out of the way, I'm going to take just a quick minute and give you a high-level overview of PeopleFluent. So we are a leading independent provider of integrated recruiting, talent management, and learning solutions. We're cloud-based, and we're really designed from the ground up to meet the unique business needs of large and diverse global enterprise employers. Now, our solutions are highly configurable. They're available a la carte or as a complete talent productivity platform. And we really empower HR professionals to transform even the most complex workflows into clear and simple and repeatable processes for candidates, employees, and managers alike. Now, all of our offerings are designed to work within a unified user experience that we call the Mirror, and it delivers many of the rich learning capabilities that we're going to be exploring in today's webinar, all within a personalized workspace that employers can truly make their own. We have deep domain expertise. We're very proud of our large and our growing client community, and we'd love to learn more about your unique challenges as well and how we can help. So be sure to visit us online, reach out to us after this webinar, and we will be happy to chat. We look forward to it. All right, so now that you've learned a bit about PeopleFluent, I would like to introduce you to the presenter for today. So Jim Lundy is one of the leading voices in human capital management and the learning space. He is CEO and lead analyst of Aragon Research. And with that, we would like you to take it away, Mr. Lundy.
Mark, thank you very much, and I look forward to dialoguing with you during the rest of this webinar, because we've got some great things to talk about the market, but also talk about some of the things that you're doing with the PeopleFluent offering. So I'm delighted to be here today. Yeah, absolutely. I'm delighted to be here today, and we're talking about this shift to something that we've been calling modern learning. And the big thing I would just say to you when we actually talk about that is that when we are looking at this, this shift, is that there's a lot of pressure on the enterprise to deliver and to perform, and people are looking for better ways to get work done. So as we dive into this discussion, we're going to talk about, some of the trends, why this is happening, what's going on with this thing called the LMS, and what are the new technologies coming online, and what should you do about it. So really looking forward to that. Mark, I'm having a little problem with the getting the button to advance. So.
All right. Yeah, let me see if I can grab it back. Sorry for the technical difficulties, folks. There we go.
Excellent. So one of the things that's we see this here at our firm. We're based in Silicon Valley. One of the things we see is the changing workforce, and there's dynamics going on in the enterprise, sometimes up to 5 different generations of associate that are in the enterprise. And, Mark and I did a podcast before this webinar. One of the things we were talking about in the podcast was the fact that, turnover in firms, not only are there generational difference, but there's also higher turnover. And so enterprises are trying to figure out how can we train more effectively, and also how can we meet the needs of people like millennials that have strong desires to learn every single day. So that's really one of the things I would just say that is a trend, is the fact that there's pressure from the associate, hey, we want to learn. There's also pressure from the enterprise of trying to get to faster business outcomes. So all of these things together put a lot of pressure on the enterprise. We just go ahead and advance. So the things we're just going to talk about, as I just mentioned in the opening comments, is some of the drivers in the marketplace that I just kind of touched on and why they're happening, and talk about this shift to modern learning and some of the technologies that are coming online, like video, social collaboration, and other things like micro-learning that are enabling something that we're formally calling modern learning, and then leave you with some tidbits and some best practices on maybe how you could leave this webinar and actually get started. And again, this webinar is being recorded, so if some of you are listening to the recording, you obviously won't be able to take part in the Q&A that Mark and I are going to be doing, but again, there's some great leave-behinds that we think will give you as far as a path to actually leave this webinar, come back on Monday, and start your action plan to shift to a modern learning approach. Go ahead and advance. So I'm here to proclaim that we're leaving the LMS era. As Mark said, I've been covering the learning space since I was at Gartner and actually started the learning practice there. And that was the early days of the LMS. And I use the analogy in the thousands of calls I've done with clients and all of our current clients at Aragon that the LMS was like a TV set. And you really needed a delivery mechanism to deliver and manage training in the early days. But today, it's not about the dials on the TV set. It's the content you can get on the go. And today, a lot of learning providers are not keeping up with the demands of the modern workforce, and they really can't, for example, in some cases, deal with things like with mobility or with video. And so the focus for the learning and development department has really been on the infrastructure and sometimes not as much on the content. And so modern learning providers are really shifting that conversation to empower learners to not only share information, but to learn faster and to learn on the fly. And so we are formally proclaiming that it's the end of the LMS era, and if that's what you're putting out an RFP for an LMS, you're doing it the wrong way. So we're going to give you a better way to attack that by talking about, describing, and defining what modern learning is. Go ahead to the next slide. And here we go. So there's a lot of elements when we talk about the rise of modern learning. And I would just say that, we'll show you a graph of a number of providers later in the webinar. But, just to say that, it's not like we just said, okay, LMS era is over, modern learning is here. This has been happening for the last 7 years. And there's been a number of different trends that have come online, as you see. So, social learning actually started, when the first community products came online back in, 2006 to 2010. Those were early days, and now, having a community and being able to share best practices or give pointers to an associate, that's kind of what people want. It's particularly what millennials want. Just-in-time learning, we'll talk about that certainly some more. Video. Video is a big, big thing. We live in a video era. If you heard about the announcements made earlier this week, many leading providers of consumer devices like Apple, they're leading with video. And then, the big thing about content is, I need content like a Netflix sort of thing. There's a lot of different content. I need to deliver it on the fly. I need to aggregate it. And in some cases, I need to empower my users to be able to deliver and create content themselves, such as a how-to video or something like that. And then maybe wrap it with a little bit of understanding of, hey, by the way, here's some courses you might want. So again, we do have a number of reasons why we think modern learning is critical, but, you know, it's knowledge at the core, but, you know, being able to do something just in time and maybe recognize that, you know, you're going on this call, you might need to know these answers. Let me share some of those with you. Video as the driver. We think a lot of legacy products that don't have video at the heart of their offering are not going to make it. And you know, and again, the shift to what students want, which is they want information when they need it, and that really means going forward that the LMS is not the center. So Mark, I know that PeopleFluent's doing a lot in both the video and social learning areas. Can you talk a little bit about what you're doing with your platform?
Yeah, absolutely, and we wholeheartedly agree with your proclamation there. You know, so at PeopleFluent, we've taken the approach that video and collaboration should just be part and parcel of the entire employee experience, right? So whether you're a new person on the job who just needs a quick tutorial about something that will help you actually get your job done, you know, in that kind of bite-sized content format that you just described, or, you know, even on the front end, if you're a candidate and you're using video to respond to questionnaires, so it takes it out of the realm of phone-based or just typing in responses, and you can actually get a flavor of what the candidate is, and they can experience you as an employer. Really, that power of video, when it all comes together, it's about productivity, right? So there are so many different use cases. I know that you're going to explore, you know, quite a few of them during today's presentation, but I think the most powerful piece is that it really puts the power into the hand of the employer on how it's deployed and how it's leveraged, and as PeopleFluent, that's really how, you know, we're really trying to play our role in making that pivot to modern learning, is by really empowering employers to use it in ways that they see most fit within their business and perhaps haven't had the opportunity to use before.
Yeah, awesome, awesome. Why don't we go ahead to the next slide. So here's another way that I would suggest that we start to look at learning both as part of both customer and employee or associate journeys. And this is a kind of an outside-in approach, and sometimes this has been referred to in traditional L&D terms as extended enterprise, like we need to be able to deliver training not just internally but externally. But a different way to look at it is really when we talk about this thing called a customer journey or an associate journey, what is that journey? And usually, you know, you get very functional on, for example, when you provide a service, you know, how do they procure the service? How do they buy it? How do they get onboarded? And sometimes what I would just point out, the number 6, which is training, how do they get trained and you know, to deliver that, and maybe get trained and get trained again, sometimes that's missing in the journey, or sometimes it's not effective, or sometimes it's like, wow, you know, that was really bad. And so, you know, sometimes basically flipping that and say, if we really want to make the journey great, are we providing, for example, how-to videos? Are we providing the associate with the first day of a welcome video from the CEO? Is that part of that journey? And so that's a different way of looking at this shift to modern learning, which is in the experience kind of approach. And I would just encourage those listening to this to step back and think about, what is the journey that our customers go through? What is the journey that our associates go through? And also our partners. Take a look at those things and say, how do we do that better? One of the ways we think that this is going to take place over time, as people like PeopleFluent and others start to look at all the big data they're getting, we think there's going to be this shift to assistance. And we think that there will be either a learning, or you could call it a knowledge assistant, that will come online. Some of them are coming online today in the form of recommendations, like, hey, here's a course that somebody else likes. So basic assistant type capabilities, just like you have voice-based search today in a lot of the mobile devices that are available. But we think between now, if we look at functionality on the vertical axis of this chart, that between now and say 2021, that we're going to have a couple phases of that, and that eventually you'll probably have a learning assistant to say, Jim, this course might actually help you get that task done, or I found a video that would actually help you, or guess what, your customer's having problems, I shared some videos with them. So not that it just it's actually happening now today in the form of chatbots. You're seeing chatbots deployed in support scenarios, sometimes on websites. Sometimes the bot on the website is annoying, but some of the chatbots are being deployed in support are actually fairly effective at answering some of your questions. So again, this is a visionary sort of thing that we think, in the learning and knowledge areas, digital workplace, that there will be, computers and applications that will help you in your quest for knowledge. And they will come in various forms. Some of them will be very tactical, like I can answer these questions and help you. I can't answer those. One of the funny stories I tell about Aragon, and one of the things we did over the summer with one of our interns, is we actually built a chatbot, on July 3rd, because we didn't give everybody July 3rd off, and some of the people were off, and I had to work because our interns were there. So we went in, and it was pretty quiet, but we built a chatbot. So it's not as hard to do as you might think. And so if you're in learning and development, and or if you're in the line of business, is that something you should think about? Maybe to say, how do we get recommendations right now, and then how could we move into this area later? It's just an interesting concept. We think it's coming full-fledged, and we think they'll be talking to you in very specific English language, with voice, not with just typing, very soon. Next slide. Okay, so here's the thing is, in learning there's been this thing called a virtual classroom that was really a way to kind of do a web conference and teach students. But we think live video is really having a huge impact in what we, in the quest for knowledge delivery, knowledge acquisition, collaboration, and really the big epitome, which is I understand, I've learned, I can act. And so when you actually look at, video use cases, no matter who the provider is or what the solution is, the number one use case, well, the number two use case outside of communications is learning. So why? Well, because people can learn much faster, and I'm going to talk to some of the benefits in another slide. But, the thing that we're pointing out here is it's not just a video recording, it's live video. And so that's really one of the things that's very interesting is, can I have a video wall with my engineers between my two dev centers, and the video wall's on all the time? I'm going to learn a lot more about what's going on, and maybe learn a lot more about my associates. And so that is actually a form of modern learning where you enable some of that technology to take place. The same thing if you've got a technician out in a remote site and you can have him or her on live and coach him or her through the scenario of, you know what, I know your tool broke, but here's a way we can jigger it so you can actually fix, that telephone box. So a lot of different interesting things, but the thing I would say to you is sometimes it's that subtle thing like we had no idea. I mean, for example, marketers. Marketers know they can educate buyers, and again, educate extended enterprise. I can educate my buyers if I can deliver more real-time content and more rich content to them. They might think about me more than the other one that was just maybe sending an email. So this kind of pervasive visual enterprise of video and live video is a trend, and it's one that you should think about. How could I do more live video and then play back the recording? Just like this webinar, we're going to be able to play this recording back. But could I also, be able to, index and share all the different videos from corporate communications, all the different instructor-led things? I'm going to record all those. I'm going to make them indexable so that I can find them. Wow, wait a minute, all of a sudden my knowledge base went way up, and if I can search those, all of a sudden my associates are going to say, wow, your corporate university is completely different than it was last year because you have so much video. And so we do think this is a time to really kind of get going on that. Mark, I got another question for you. We know, we've got learning as one of the top use cases. I know in talking to you that you're starting to see a lot of interest in this with the Mira platform, which is video-enabled. Can you talk a little bit about some of the things you're seeing with your customers?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, it's an extension of what you've just been talking about around, video delivering that kind of just-in-time learning, that information that I need when I need it. It doesn't have to be within a traditional formal learning environment, right? So our clients are using it to make knowledge sharing and even internal community building and employee career growth more continuous and less episodic, right? So it's not just, a learning module that you attend and you test on, and then, that you're kind of on to the next thing. It's to embed it in your day-to-day processes. So those traditional use cases that are about, providing training and tracking course completion and using that for compliance purposes, that's still part of what needs to be done today, but they're really complemented, and in fact, I would argue that even those types of activities are starting to be superseded by the capabilities we're discussing here around modern learning, right? It's about bringing insight and instruction to employers or managers directly in line with their day-to-day activities. So delivering bite-sized pieces of content and learning that really does enhance not just the way they do their jobs, but how do they perform as individuals, how do they step up their career functions, how do they become better managers and coaches. So, we're really inspired by providing the tool, providing the platform to our clients and kind of seeing where they take it. But those are some of the more innovative things that we're seeing going on within our client community.
Yeah, and one of the things that's kind of interesting, I would just throw out, Mark, that we've noticed with the mirrors, you actually have a full video platform embedded in your talent management mirror offering. So that gives you a lot of those power indexing capabilities that maybe some other ones don't have.
Yeah, it absolutely does. And again, it makes that learning as a continuous, coaching as a continuous part of your day-to-day options. It opens that up to you.
Okay, great. Let's keep going. So another trend that we talk about is called digital work hubs, and the idea that different types of knowledge workers, factory workers, fast service workers are going to have different ways to collaborate and get work done. And the reason why this is a trend is that in some cases, a modern learning offering, it may be the engagement center for associates, the digital water cooler where they're sharing best practices and how-tos, or they're helping each other like, hey, I'm having trouble, with this, 3, 2, 1, go, help me. And again, these collaborative social learning capabilities where people can say, oh, my associate overseas is having trouble with the exact product that I support. I'm going to respond to this comment and tell them, or even share a video like, hey, here's the link on how to do that. So when you talk about the whole digital work hub approach, sometimes people forget, with even a social intranet, the number one reason that those things become effective is if people can share knowledge. And same thing with customer support communities. The biggest reason that those things are popular is I can get to that answer quicker. The thing that we see, however, is if you look at traditional communities for support, most of them don't have things like video. And so that's really the new thing of just-in-time nugget-based sorts of kind of capabilities. And I think the other thing with mobility is if I can see that on the fly, I'm traveling, I see a comment pop up or I get a notification, I can reply right away. So that's the thing, is it becomes more of a normal part of your work life. And again, we're pretty bullish. We've been talking about video for a long time, but it's coming like a freight train. We're not going to talk about things like video resolution in this webinar, but the higher resolution videos as well, both live and recorded, will increase recall. And I'll touch on that a little bit when we dive into the technology section. You go ahead to the next slide. So this is a little bit of an eye chart, but this is our technology arc that kind of rates in learning and human capital management. Some of the technologies that have been emerging for a while, micro-learning, video learning, interactive content, things like record stores. So we look at all the things that are emerging, all the things that are in the adoption phase, and then all the mature things like, I don't have it circled, but over in the mature arc, you can see our, our beloved LMS and things like web and video conferencing, and then just the whole practice of corporate learning. Modern learning is coming online, and, again, we just kind of basically figured this out when we did a Globe report earlier this year, but it's really amalgamating things like video and micro-learning into one cohesive offering. And again, that's what's, I think, so interesting is, as Mark and I were preparing for this, it was, I think the thing that PeopleFluent launched this a couple years ago, and now I think that, modern learning is here, and that's what users are demanding. When we talk to clients, our end user clients, here's the interesting thing. The business people want to talk about the stuff on the left-hand side. Hey, I need to talk about that stuff that's going to help me that's emerging. What's micro-learning? Sometimes the L&D people say, look, we just want to replace our LMS provider. And so sometimes the answer is, it's not necessarily replacing, it's augmenting and moving faster. And so that's what the business people want. Training and sales is a massive, massive issue. How do we use micro-learning, modern learning, video learning to train our salespeople faster? If I can train my salespeople, my support people, and maybe even my service people on the fly, on the go, every single day, will they perform better? And you're starting to see analytics that will give you that information that allow you to do that. So again, we publish this report every year. We also have ones on digital workplace that have a few more entries. We have one on AI as well, because there are some entries here, for things like machine learning. Notice there is one that I didn't talk about called knowledge automation on the Emerge arc. Still hasn't moved very much, but when we actually look at these modern learning platforms, as you add more analytics into them, they really are about automating the knowledge delivery to help people get their jobs done. And increasingly, applications, bots and digital assistants will help with that knowledge delivery. So again, it's a fairly long report. Every single entry on this has a half-page write-up on why it's important, who are some of the players. And, again, this is one of the things that how we track how the technologies are evolving. So, again, this whole thing of amalgamating different things, because there's some people that only do video, there's some people that only do social, and the modern learning providers do all of that, as you saw in the earlier graph. Let's go to the next slide. So really, the learning suite, which used to be the battle cry, or the talent suite where learning's just absorbed and you got to buy a talent suite, we think that even though it is important to be able to deal maybe with one or two providers, we think it's really more about, augmenting existing things with newer platforms that bring third-party courses, bring integrations. So maybe I still want to keep my old LMS and I want to feed it through APIs, and I can keep track of compliance, but I really need to get a newer offering because my users want it. And I need more third-party courses, and I really need video. So again, the new way to learn is basically starting to step back, and I'll talk about this in a second, in a couple slides, but the new way is not the old way. And so, sending out long RFPs on features of, can I track students that come to a physical class? Can I track them online? No, I really need lightweight capabilities, but what I need is more channels of courses that are more tuned to the needs of the specific, bodies of learners, both customer learners and partner learners and obviously associates. So that's kind of what is changing, and I think it's catching some providers off guard that have not made those investments. And again, we've heard stories where chief learning officers turned off their LMS and nothing happened. Nobody complained. And so that might mean, that's kind of interesting. What are they doing? And our business units in a large enterprise going somewhere else and not telling L&D that they're doing that. So the needs of the business, it's a very, very competitive world. And if people are better trained through modern learning, they're going to be happier and they're going to probably perform better. So again, this gets at some of the infrastructure sorts of things. Now let's talk about, on the next slide, some of the use cases. So the modalities we have when we talk about modern learning, one of the real big things is just in time. And so that's where analytics comes into play. It comes into basically understanding who that user is, what they do, and can I serve them information that might be tied into their job so they can do better, or can I help them, because they need something just in time, find it really quickly so I can watch the video about the new product launch and kind of memorize some of those things before I go on a call. So right before I need to go on a call, I can get some of those knowledge nuggets. The traditional skill building, but again, one of the things we're starting to see more of is the ability with video, for example, to do more role plays or to show more things specifically, like this is actually how you replace the carburetor on that aging truck here's the archive video, and it takes you right to the scene where the problem usually occurs because the bolt is rusted. And so, again, those skill buildings, we certainly see that in sales role plays, so where they can use their phone and do a capture, and then the manager can actually do a compare. That's kind of really cool. And again, interactive. So the visual nature of learning is one of the best ways people learn. Traditional simulations that were visual or video-based, but now just video snippets, again, that are bite-sized or chapterized, and I can use the indexing to get right to the scene where it tells me, how to fix, the part on the car that's so hard to understand because maybe the tools are hard to get into the crevice, and this shows me how to navigate the tool to get into the crevice to fix it. So again, this whole idea of interactivity. And then last but most importantly is mobile first. Being able to do this on the go, on a tablet, really, really critical, online, offline. But again, those are some of the things that are starting to come online. But, really, the big things, it's not just teach and test. It's really about continuous delivery. And if we talk about, again, even another lens on modern learning everywhere, if we go to the next slide, we look at some of the different what do I say, it happens everywhere, it's pervasive. But the thing is that you really have to, kind of design this from the inside out. So whether it's an employee engagement intranet, whether it's a customer community, just the day-to-day learning that I was kind of talking about, where it's always on, it's always happening, and it's easy. Obviously, there's communities where marketing is driving it, but there's also just traditional support. And obviously, I talked about sales a little bit as well, but it's sales and partners. Those are some of the things that we're seeing. Mark, you mentioned earlier that you've got a lot of things going on in some of your industries. Can you talk a little bit about some of the things you're seeing with modern learning and like maybe healthcare and other areas?
Yeah, absolutely. We have talked about healthcare quite a bit, and it's definitely one. And I think that a big part of it is if you look at hospitals and healthcare in general, it's a really fast-changing environment today, right? So you've got new regulations and new procedures. There's new equipment that's being rolled out on a regular basis. There's new policies that are being introduced either at the facility level or even at the federal or state level. Treatments are constantly being invented or enhanced, and you have to keep up to speed with those. Changes within the community in which the facility serves, or the healthcare facility serves. So, there's lots of different cases. There's lots of different things that are changing at a pretty rapid pace, and learning really helps them to keep pace with that, right, and to make sure that it gets out and proliferated within their employee base. But honestly, we work with financial service institutions that leveraged it. You gave a good use case around sales. That's applicable in multiple areas. Transportation companies, retail organizations are starting to embrace this, and manufacturing too. And what's really powerful about this approach is that broad applicability. It's got a huge impact, and with the right platform, it's easy to pull together. So let me give you an example of how modern learning could really have a big impact. If you look at the dynamics of the labor market today, just in general, and this really shines more brightly in areas like manufacturing, where you have individuals who are leaving the business and not having new people joining the business as quickly as possible to kind of close that gap. And when those individuals who have been working with your company for 10, 20, 30 years, they've got decades of experience, and when they're leaving, they're taking an awful lot of tribal knowledge with them too, right? So, these more seasoned employees, when they leave your business, it can actually have quite a big impact. But if you leverage modern learning, if you have a way to capture their information, their expertise around doing their jobs, and you can bottle it and share it out on a mass scale, it really helps to raise not only the ability to kind of share and pass along that knowledge, but the ability to help those new hires, when they come on board, they can come up to speed faster, and it's a much more engaging way to learn.
Cool. Well, let's keep going. Let's dive in even a little further. into the technology. So if you go to the next slide, I want to talk a little bit about this whole thing of social learning. So a lot of people talk about social learning and putting it to work, but a lot of times people have very basic capabilities. But here's some of the thoughts I would share with you is when you look at different associate types in workforces and teams, one of the things that people do is we wake up every day, we want to learn. And the best high performers are constantly doing that. Hey, how'd you do that? How'd you win that deal? How did you do that service thing? How did you fix that machine? So social learning really helps to put best practices to work. And you can basically attract new members like, yeah, I learned that in the community. You also start to figure out, like, through things like rewards, like certainly in customer communities you see that, but you can do that also internally, like you can give them rewards for participation. But I think the other thing is there's when you do all that, you get something. First of all, people get answers, but the other thing is you get increased engagement because there is a pride and ownership of I helped that person and we won a deal, or I helped that person and the customer's really happy, or I helped this manager who was really struggling and he or she was really happy. So we talk about this, and it's been talked about for years, but really what we see now is it's really coming online now. And if you look at all the social networking tools out there, if you talk to anybody that has them, what's the number one use case, whether it's internal or external? It's learning. And again, Mark, you guys, PeopleFluent, acquired a company called SocialText a few years ago, the leading, social networking provider. That's actually something else that you've got, kind of as an oh, by the way, that's how we power the mirror. Can you talk about some of the things that's going on with that too?
Yeah, absolutely. And, again, we talked about this a little bit throughout the call, but I think one of the dynamics that we're really looking at in the marketplace right now is that employees are keenly interested in not only learning the skills that are going to help them to be better at a specific task within their day-to-day responsibilities, but also they want to enhance their skills and their activities that are going to give them a leg up and improve their career growth opportunities in general, whether it's within your business or outside. Preferably you want to keep your talent within the four walls of your business, but everyone is interested in growing and expanding their knowledge and their skills base. So from a social perspective, from a collaborative perspective, helping employees to get plugged into, for example, an internal peer and mentoring network really accelerates their ability to get established faster, to be able to ask questions and share knowledge with a group of people who have been there, done that, so to speak. And it goes beyond just chat, right? It's the ability to share content, to comment, to interact, to share those videos. It's all part of the modern learning model, and again, we're seeing that as the workforce evolves and as different career aspirations evolve, this is only getting stronger. It's only getting a more specific ask that we're seeing coming out of the marketplace.
Oh, excellent, excellent. Let's keep going. Let's talk about the next slide. So video learning, we're basically saying that, video learning is part of a digital enterprise. So what do we mean by that? Well, first of all, it's the fastest way that people can sometimes learn is by watching, no matter what activity you're doing. Why do you think professional athletes watch replay videos of how they did after after the play or after the game? The other thing that's really interesting is it's now much easier to do it. 3 or 4 years ago, it wasn't as popular because we didn't have bandwidth and we didn't have the ability to create videos. And we still get questions about that because we put video in some of our research, and people ask, hey, they ask us, hey, how did you do that? So that's really one of the things we'll talk about a forecast for content and learning content here in a little bit. But if I can find, how do young people, learn today, children or grandchildren or associates, even millennials? Well, I actually went on YouTube, I searched, and I found something. So they want that YouTube/Netflix thing, that experience, like I can search or it can even suggest, but I found the thing that helped me do that. So when I say it's part of a digital enterprise, one of the things we're seeing is that a lot of bleeding-edge SaaS software companies are starting to put more video in their support sites to say, instead of it being a knowledge base, they've got a base of channels of videos that will tell you exactly, instead of saying log in, do this, do that, it actually says watch the video, it shows you how to do it. And so those companies actually have much higher net promoter scores. Why should you do video learning? Why should video learning be something that you leave this webinar and say, we must do this? Because we still get comments like, no, we're not going to do it, it's too hard. Today, it's not too hard. One of the biggest reasons is you're going to have almost a 7x memory recall when you share videos with associates internally for onboarding and for ongoing skill-based training because of the how-tos. 7 times better. You know why? Because it imprints, when the video plays and they see a scene and they can see it clearly, it's going to imprint that and allow your brain to recall it. And so if you're a marketer and you're doing branding videos, they're going to remember your brand, and that's a form of learning. If you're corporate communications and you want them to remember this when the CEO said this, and it's a well-executed scene in the corporate communication sessions, they're going to remember that. And again, that crisp video of the how-to, which is 1080p or maybe even 4K, particularly if it's a 4K and it looks like it's lifelike, they're going to say, yeah, I remember that scene in that video and it just stuck with me. So, and then by the way, it's the way people want to learn. So, we've seen people rebrand their entire corporate university when they added video to it. And overwhelming responses like unbelievable, standing ovation, can't believe you guys did such a recovery. And so basically, if you're in L&D, you can completely rebrand the perception and the execution of what you're doing. So this is really one of the things we say that you actually have to step up and you just got to do. And by the way, you might be surprised how many people say, hey, I want to, contribute some courses. And by the way, I've done this a few times with clients where we said, look, why don't we, get some phones with cameras or, so that you can start sharing some best practices like in healthcare, amongst nurses, and then put them up in the community for the nurses to look at and let them vote on the best video for that particular procedure. Guess what? Guess what happens is, hey, mine was the best video. It doesn't have to be, for some of the how-to things, a perfect curated thing. Now, again, you still may want to have the, this is the, actual, course, but you might want to say, guess what, when they're in the field, they're working, they're in the production thing, can they share something that then can say, you know what, that actually is better, let's share that. So, again, that's the thing I would probably say when you actually look at the, the modern learning provider market. That's one of the questions you could say is we need a little bit more than just sharing video links from a third-party, thing. We need native video. So again, that's really one of the things we would say as a must-have thing and a must-do thing. You can't ignore it. We think 2018 is the year that video content starts to overtake text content as far as volume in the enterprise. And so a lot of enterprises today are unprepared for this onslaught. And again, one of the things you don't want to have happen, you don't want to lose control where they went off and did some deal with some Timbuktu firm that maybe might not meet your security requirements, and then you've got some compliance issues. Don't spend 2 years trying to figure this out. Sometimes what you got to do is just push your LMS aside and deploy a modern learning platform that I'll talk about in a second. So we do look at providers. We go to the next slide, and we wrote a report earlier this year that. And I'm just highlighting PeopleFluent was named a leader in pretty strong innovation because of their mobile, their video, and their social learning capabilities. So we do think this whole shift to informal learning and video learning and just-in-time knowledge delivery is some of the trends. But again, the thing that's interesting is some of the large talent management providers are not really keeping up with the innovations in learning, because here's what we think. It's hard to do all the different applications and be perfect in everything, and many of them are not making the investments like PeopleFluent has in delivering a modern learning platform that can do the social learning, can do the video learning, can do the micro-learning. And so that's one of the things we would say. Again, that report's I think at both PeopleFluent's site and ours, but we've been studying this quite hard, and this was the beginning of the day of reckoning, but going forward, our focus is going to be just on those modern learning attributes that I talked about earlier, and not trying to track, how vendors are updating their LMS. So you're hearing it here, the LMS is dead. So how do you prepare for this? So a couple things. We actually are one of the few research firms that actually has a content forecast for learning. So it's our learning content spending forecast. This is the amount of money enterprises spend on content that's associated with training or product launches. In 2003, it was about $100 billion. In 2013, is about about $300 billion. That's non-higher ed spending on content and courses, and we think it's doubling between 2013 and 2018. Why? Well, guess what? It's all the spending on video and micro learning, and it's going to be not only for core learning but also customer support. So people are spending tons and tons of money to be able to do that, and you really need a modern platform that can curate that and deliver that both to associates, to partners, and to customers. So again, the recall rate, the ability to learn is faster, and again, that retention rate I shared with you. And the other thing is our brain. Most of our generations have grown up with that a visual, thing of how we've learned, both in people-to-people, in sports, in entertainment, and now in the workplace. So I hit that before, you're hearing it again. We've been talking about this since 2013, and now we know that the future is here, and it is a video-enabled future, and so it's really time to prepare. You really can't ignore this anymore, and guess what? It's not as hard as you think. Every associate at Aragon knows how to create a video, just like, people like Google, know how to write a search application. We've bet the farm on that as well. And by the way, it's a lot of fun to do that. So again, we would just say is one of the ways you could do this is say, in your department, at your firm, I want to have a contest in who could create a video on this how-to. And just put it out there, as a challenge and see what people come back with. Hey, did you see what I did? And by the way, there's a lot of really fun ways to do that, but it can be a way to also juice the engagement. So it's a hackathon for a how-to. And I would encourage you, that's one of the ways you can start to say, wow, that went a lot better than we thought. And, even competing teams, like, you do it once and then you say, let's compete the teams together and see what else we could do. Go to the next slide. So we're going to leave you with a journey. So, I talked about customer journeys earlier. This is the journey to modern learning. And the journey starts with procuring a modern learning platform. That's what we think the first step is. And it's got to be able to do the things we talked about, which is it's got to be able to do native video. It's got to be able to do collaboration, social. It's got to be able to help with some of those just-in-time delivery things. You've also got to get a plan for doing more with your content. And again, I talked about, earlier, the idea of a lot of times people focus on a TV set, but not the TV shows. So you got to have a plan for content for your various stakeholder roles. So that's building content, that's building more curated videos, that's allowing and enabling and not blocking user-generated content, and it's buying and licensing third-party content. You need to roll it out. You need to launch and learn. You may do a controlled release. It may not be perfect, but the idea is if you have some of that rich content and they can see it and they can watch it, they're going to like it. And then the last thing you really need to do, again, with some of the advanced analytics that people like PeopleFluent and others can offer you is you've got to start to measure what the impact of that training can do relative to getting to those faster business outcomes. So it's really, really simple. Procure, deploy, roll it out, and measure. It's not that hard. It's not a big procurement. It's really about getting going and getting faster. Start with a use case. For example, I've mentioned sales a couple times. I think that's a great place to start. I also think that associate engagement. Let's make it easier to onboard our associates. Let's have some great onboarding content, some great videos from the CEO, and redo our onboarding. Two great ways for you to get started. So if we go to the final slide before we go to Q&A, and so if you don't have a question yet, please think about that, because in about 30 seconds we're going to jump right into Q&A. So the high-performance organizations are embracing this thing called continuous learning, but it really now is becoming more of a modern thing. And so whether it's the workplace, whether it's the customer experience, embracing modern learning as the new way forward, doing all the things we talked about, previously in this webinar, and coming back Monday and starting your action plan, and meaning that you don't wait to get started. That's what we think is the new race. And if you're one of the stakeholders, whether you're in the business unit or if you're in L&D or HR, I'm guaranteeing you that if you do this, you will be a hero and it will advance your career. Because that's what people want, and when you do it, it's just amazing. Like, I watched that course, it was so great, and now I can do my job better. So, Mark, that's our overview, and I'm going to turn it over to you so we can dive right into some of that Q&A.
Absolutely. So this was a great presentation. Thank you. And we've got a couple of really cool questions. One, I guarantee, was based on someone who watched the Apple keynote the other day. So I'm going to save that one for last. But we have a lot of questions around. How's that for leaving a cliffhanger for the end? We have a lot of questions that seem to do with kind of transitioning from traditional to modern, and a lot around content. But I'll start with one that is, what are the best ways to get my company unstuck from, and this is in quotes, an old school view of learning? I think that's a pretty broad topic, but what do you tell clients who are trying to get going on that one?
Well, here's the thing I would probably say is, if we just say, let's put aside, some of the infrastructure, I think the way that you start to do that is you basically say, we're going to bring some new channels online, meaning content, and we're going to rebrand our initiative. And so just by doing that one thing, which is, guess what, we just turned on leadership development with some basic video stuff and some basic onboarding, and we just turned on visual-based onboarding. So just doing those two things really will basically almost immediately guarantee that you're going to make that switch. And so that would be the way that I would say. We've actually helped some firms, just change their branding, get a couple videos out there, and then maybe deploy the whole platform. So it's kind of a launch and learn. Like, we're going to put this out there, see what happens. But we've seen it happen where people said, they would send out a video a week, and they said, by the way, did you know that we actually have a couple of new video onboarding courses for this particular topic? And they got tons of viewership. It went viral, and then the word spread like, hey, you sent out the newsletter with the highlights this week? And so, again, those would be some of my thoughts about best practices.
Very cool. And then just looking at the clock, I think I can collapse a couple of questions around content into one with maybe two parts. One is, and I think it's tied to the kind of getting unstuck, is how do you change minds about content needing to be owned from a single team? And kind of piggybacking off that one, there's a question around content and quality from a production value standpoint. Can you make some comments on those?
Yeah. So I think this answering the first one, on ownership, and I've had tons of questions and calls on this over the years. So there's two things. I had a call with an automotive company a little while ago, and it was about control. And so we're going to own everything. HR owns all that content. And I was like, okay, so wait a minute. So let me just back up here. So you're telling me that for that new engine you're rolling out, that you're going to own the training for that, and you're going to be responsible if you don't get the technicians trained? That's going to be on you? Oh, absolutely not. I said, so why do you want to own the content? Because then you're going to own when it fails, because you didn't do good content. You're going to own that, so you'll get fired. So, no, we don't do that. I said, yeah, you want to basically make sure that you enable it and that you can help them maybe produce it, but you got to make the business unit have responsibility for the great content, because it's really their show. You're enabling the show, and you may help them produce it, but you don't own it. So I think that's a really critical difference in helping a business unit versus saying we control everything. You can't control it today. You just can't. Right. You have to enable it, and you kind of have to let go. So if you're thinking about we need to control it, you're kind of looking at it a little bit the wrong way. Old content, fresh content, I would just say this is, you'd be surprised that, again, I talked about that contest, user-generated content. User-generated content is not a bad thing. And again, you might say, hey, they can get it 90% of the way, but the thing is, it might not be part of a formal curriculum, but just-in-time learning, where you can have technicians, or fast food workers, hey, I just found a new way to turn the hamburger machine on. Boom, watch my video. That's a just-in-time learning nugget. Let that one go. So again, I think this is one of the things where, you may have to have some moderation, the wrong videos will be deleted, but in some cases, you kind of got to let it go.
Yeah, and I think from a production value standpoint, if you just look at the quality of video that you can shoot from the phone in your pocket, I mean, that gap's closed pretty quickly. So the days of, having to use elaborate video productions that, require extensive setup and, a lot of associated dollars with it, I think those days are kind of going by the wayside, right?
That's right.
All right, we've got two more questions. One is, do you have any insight into what the big tech companies are using for modern learning? And they give an example of Apple, Google, and Amazon.
Well, I can tell you for a fact that a lot of the big tech companies have been doing video for years, and they just don't want you to know it. Even big aerospace companies have had, video-based learning simulations for executive training, where it's actually a video game and it's visual-based, and you have a role, and you're in a simulation. It's video-based, and some of them have done that for years, and they don't want you to know it because it's how they train their executives. So, yeah, a lot of the companies, when you talk about the big tech companies, for example, they're 100% video conferencing enabled in every conference room. Let's just talk about, the iPhone launch this week. It was done at the Steve Jobs Center. You know what Steve did before he passed away? They made videos of him for learning, and he did a lot of work around how to, Apple associates, how do we train Apple associates? So, because he knew he wasn't going to be around. So there's a lot of things that they did, and that's one of the things that Apple really doesn't talk about. They spent a lot of time and money on training people. They want to hire people with expertise, but they also want them to be able to work in the Apple way, and they've done that quietly. There's no real case studies about it because they don't want you to know that. And so if you actually look at fast-growing companies, why are they growing? Why is Apple twice the size of Microsoft? Because they spend money on training, and they have good products too.
Right. Right. All right, and the last question we have, are you seeing any companies starting to use augmented reality for virtual coaching? I thought that was kind of a cool one.
Yeah, so the answer is we're seeing that right now starting to appear with augmented reality. So again, for those of you who don't know, this week with the Apple iPhone 8 and iPhone X or iPhone 10 with iOS 11, there's a thing called AR Kit or augmented reality. So that means you can overlay images on people in like a live video session. And so that means that for things like service, if I have a phone and I could, basically, be showing a video, what somebody on the remote side could do is potentially even say, draw arrows or actually point to, like, here's the thing you need to do to fix that. So that's why you're starting to see glasses. Google just launched Google Glass 2.0. You're seeing manufacturers with open source kits to say, I can wear some of these glasses for augmented reality so I don't have to ship a technician in. The technician on site can wear these glasses, and the person remotely can see what the technician is doing and direct him with maybe some visual gestures that appear on his glasses. That's what they call augmented reality. So yes, there are some car companies that are experimenting with that. I think you're going to see it start to pop up because now what's going to happen is Google, but it's not just Apple, also Google. The mobile guys are going to make it a lot easier, and it's going to start in consumer and quickly go commercial. Now, again, in the whole area of IoT or Internet of Everything, virtual reality has been a big thing, but augmented reality is really more about just basically we think we predict at the beginning of this year that it was augmented reality would be the #1 use case for that. But it's still very early days, and most of the stuff we've seen isn't quite in production yet. But we think next year and the year after, you'll see more AR go into production. And we think, by the way, it's service and support that will be the big use cases.
Absolutely. And it's really coming to the masses, to your point, right? It's starting to trickle out in consumer-grade products, and I think the more we see that, the more people will be able to leverage that within their modern learning and a contemporary platform like ours as well. So, all right, well, look at that timing-wise. We're 1 minute over, but we tackled all the questions. We tackled some phenomenal content. So, Jim, I can't thank you enough and your team over at Aragon for the effort that was put into this.
Great. Well, look, we enjoyed it, Mark. It was great doing it with PeopleFluent, and we look forward to talking to you all again soon.
Excellent. All right. Thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in. Again, keep your eyes peeled for that email with the recording, and we will catch you on the next one. Have a great day.